In 2012, national attention was focused on the Tucson public schools when the school district decided to terminate a very successful Mexican American Studies program. This happened after the state passed a law prohibiting the teaching of ethnic studies courses, and the district faced the loss of $14 million of funding if the program continued. Today, we are excited and honored to be speaking by phone with Norma Gonzalez, a leader in the struggle for Mexican American Studies in Tucson. Norma was a curriculum specialist with the Mexican American Studies Department for 10 years and is currently a third-grade teacher at Monso Elementary School in Tucson. Norma, welcome to Flashpoints, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
All right. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about what's important to know about you and the work that you've been doing in education, ethnic studies, and social justice?
Sure. I think that the work that I do and critical educators do around the nation is critical in that, we seek to critique the educational system because we have an understanding that it's not an equal system. It's a very unequal system that serves to benefit a dominant group and has traditionally underserved, particularly students of color. And so, with that goal, we've been looking at curriculum, pedagogies, and methodologies that serve to not only help underrepresented and underprivileged students have academic success, but it also helps them to feel connected to education, the educational system, and to the curriculum.
All right. Can you give us some background about the Mexican American Studies program in Tucson Unified School District? When was the program started, and what was its purpose?
Well, the Mexican American Studies Department and program really was a grassroots effort where we had the community, the Chicano community here in Tucson in the 70s and 80s, parallel to the Chicano movement. But we had people who recognized, again, that our needs, the Chicano population needs, were not being met through the educational system. And so there was a push to ensure, to guarantee that we were getting equal opportunities at achievement in education, in academics. And so the group of people came together, predominantly leaders within the Chicano movement here in Tucson, graduate students at the university, and they came together and they petitioned the school board to get equitable practices. And so years later, after the movement, then what we had finally was established in 1998 a department, Mexican American Studies. Well, it was called Hispanic Studies at the time. And so one person ran the department, and it was really just kind of a department by name. And it wasn't until about 2000 when we had a couple of really innovative educators, Ray Chavez and Sean Arce, that came together, and they recognized that, curriculum was key in helping students connect to, school, to feel connected to school. And so then Ray Chavez became the director, and Sean Arce was the, one of the teachers, and they started to develop a curriculum and a pedagogy. And then, slowly, a few years after, a couple of us teachers came aboard, and our goal was to look at practices that were successful with the Chicano population that we can replicate in our district. And so from that, we created the curriculum, we created a pedagogy, a model that we utilized that was highly effective, to the degree that, there's been studies that affirm that it was this pedagogy was extremely effective with the Chicano population.
All right.
That's a history kind of in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. And at the time that the program came under attack in 2012, how many students, teachers, and schools were involved, roughly?
Roughly, there was about 4 high schools that all provided core courses in history, government, and literature, with about, I would say, 6 teachers that were all in the classrooms, in the high school courses, teaching these core courses for graduation credit. We had a couple of courses at the middle school level, and then at the elementary level, it was more teacher modeling, teacher mentoring, where I would model how to infuse culture and culturally relevant pedagogies in the classroom.
Okay. And what kind of impact did the program have on students in the community?
The impact on students, again, is nationally recognized for its effectiveness, in that our students, the students that went through the program, Mexican American Studies program, they were outperforming the European American group, which is the group that traditionally does better on high-stake tests. And so our students were outperforming them across the board in reading, writing, and math. Our students were graduating from high school, and when we look at the push-out rate for Chicano students, it's alarming. It should be a national crisis that no one is addressing. And so our students are graduating, and they were matriculating into institutions of higher education. And so the impact was tremendous, in that it was changing, and it was challenging the status quo and what traditionally was the experience for Chicano students in our district.
So talk to us then about the events that led up to the district's decision to terminate Mexican American Studies.
Events that led up to the termination, well, I think that, if you look at the politics in Arizona is a very red state, and it's an anti-Latino state, in that, laws are created to continue to disenfranchise the Latino population. And so if we look at that agenda, that political agenda, then it makes sense that, the Chicano population would be the scapegoats, and that you had the superintendent of public education running on a campaign to eliminate Raza studies. And so essentially that is the political climate here in Arizona for Latino population.
Okay, so I want to parse out a little more clearly what the state was actually saying, and then what you believe might have been the real reasons why they were doing what they were doing. What I'm hearing you say is that the state superintendent basically used the attack on Mexican American Studies as a campaign tool to kind of mobilize racist support. What was he actually saying was the reason? I guess there was actually a state bill passed that banned ethnic studies. What was the rationale that they were using?
Well, legislation was created to eliminate our program, in that the state was claiming that we were in our classes planning the overthrow of the United States government. And so, as ridiculous as that sounds, that's what we were being accused of. We were being accused of teaching the hatred of another group. We were being accused of ethnic solidarity, whatever that means. Like if that's something that's wrong. And so, those are some of that's the language in the legislation, and what the state was accusing us of doing in our classrooms. And so, what happened is they hired a group to come in, an audit group. We were audited, and that people were coming into our classrooms, and they were investigating what we were doing, and we thought it was a hit job. We thought that the state was going in to find out what they were accusing us of, but they actually found that our classes were teaching critical thinking, that our students and the relationship with the teachers were outstanding, and that they were respectable, they were reciprocal, and so that audit actually, concluded that we were having effective practices in our classroom, and that they should be replicated. So it backfired on them. Yet, when they received the results, then what the superintendent said is, well, no, it is a curriculum issue or a values issue, and so they were always trying to find something, create something that they can, get us on. But essentially, that's what the state was claiming that we were doing, is planning the overthrow of the United States government.
All right. Wow. Now, the district, what was their stance in all of this? Like, had they been supportive of the program? I mean, I know they ultimately caved in, but where were they in this, and what motivated their ultimate decision to go along with this?
Well, the district was being threatened with reduction in the budget, $15 million if they found an incident where the sole person who could come in and determine if we were in violation was the superintendent, John Hupenthaw. And so he was given the power to go into our classes and determine whether or not we were complying with the law. And if he found that we were out of compliance, then the state would fine us $15 million. And so the district, what they did is they cowered. They cowered to the state, and they said that we cannot afford to lose $15 million, because what about the rest of the students? And so, sadly, in my opinion, it was the district cowarding to the state, as opposed to this is a program that is effective, that has proven to be effective. Here you have the data. And they're not supporting the data and what it shows about what we're doing in the classrooms with our students.
Okay. Now, I understand that a number of books were also banned in the district at that same time. Which books were they, and what was the rationale for banning those?
Well, again, in line with the legislation that said we were teaching the overthrow of the government. Basically, they were saying that these books did not follow with Western values, and that they were anti-Western values, and so they were books that were promoting a Mexican or Chicano culture, and so some of the books that they didn't allow in our classrooms were the book by Rudy Acuña, Occupied America, and so they looked at the title, and that was evidence that we were going to overthrow the government. That Aztlán was, we were trying to regain Aztlán, and they took a couple of sentences from the entire book and used that as evidence that we were being hateful towards a group of people. There was a sentence where it talks about the gringo. It used the word the gringo, and so that was their rationale for these books are not, they're not okay to use in the classrooms. And so, other books, The 500 Years of Chicano History by Betita Martinez, and so Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which they claimed was, teaching that people of color are oppressed. And so, those were some of the major books that were banned in our classrooms.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's a little short list of recommended reading for our listeners.
Yeah.
All right. So describe the response of the community and the country to the attack on ethnic studies and the book bannings. What kinds of support did you get locally and nationally?
Right. Well, of course, locally, there's videos where you can see our students in our classes educating their rights as citizens to a right to an education. And so they were being civically engaged. They were out at board meetings and talking to board members, and they were writing editorials to the paper. And so you really don't see high school students engaged civically, as much as our students were out there fighting for, what they believed is their right as human beings. We have the right to an education, we have a right to an equitable education, and we have the right to learn about our culture. And so in that sense, our students were out there, and there's, tons of videos that can exemplify, to the degree that they were fighting for their education. Of course, in the community, we've had huge support in that, again, we had leaders from the movement in the 60s and 70s that were coming out, and they were supporting us, and they were supporting the classes, and so huge support, locally by our students and our families and our community. And then, of course, nationally, again, huge support because people are recognizing that, this is a program that works effectively, that disrupts the status quo, that disrupts, what the educational system has done for students of color. And so they recognize that, and they've been very supportive. We've received much support as we travel across the nation to share our story, and it's been real hopeful to know that people are out there supporting, this program and what it means for the nation. Because, once you take a program like this that works, then that is an example of something that can be taken away. And so the implications are not just here locally, but I think nationally. And so I think also that's why, educators were also supporting it because of the implications nationwide.
Mm-hmm, definitely. What is the current status of the program? It's now 2.5 years later. I know they formally terminated that program. Is there any form of Mexican-American studies being taught in Tucson at this point? Are those books still on a ban list? Just update us on what's happened since.
Right. Well, to update, we are under a federal mandate. The district is under a federal mandate, and the federal mandate has existed for, over 30 years. And so through that mandate, we are federally mandated to provide an equitable education. And so because that mandate exists, then something has to be in place that was like Mexican American studies. And so what has been created is what are called the culturally responsive pedagogy and instruction, which is a department that looks at the utilization of culturally relevant pedagogies and instruction, again, to provide equitable and positive academic opportunities for students of color. And so, they've existed. I don't think that, it's been the mandates have been met given the timeline. The district's been very slow in providing what is required through the federal mandate. And so, it just recently there's a move to legitimize the department through, with a director, and there's high schools were supposed to be impacted district-wide, but currently there's only, I believe, 4 high schools that actually have, and what they're calling them now is a history from a Mexican-American perspective, or from an African-American perspective, or Native American perspective, or a traditional perspective. So they're still being offered. However, the state is still very, looking at us in terms of, are they utilizing the same pedagogy? Are they utilizing the same curriculum? And so there's continued scrutiny on what is being produced because it sounds like what Mexican American Studies had.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I wonder if there's anything you want to share about what happened personally to some of the leaders of the program. I understand that the director, Sean Arce, was terminated. Did that happen to anybody else? And what went down to the people who were leading the program?
Right, yeah. Unfortunately, it was pretty vicious how, the district came down on some of us. Sean Arce was indeed fired. Rene Martinez, a teacher, a high school teacher, he taught history, was also fired. And they tried to fire me. I was served with a letter from, the Human Resources Department that said the district can no longer employ you. You're not highly qualified, and we don't have a position for you. And so essentially, I had to fight for a position to regain my position, and I did. And so 3 of us were fired, and the rest of us were displaced. And displaced meaning that we were working in central office, but they sent us to the school sites furthest from the central office, teaching subjects that we were not, we didn't teach. And so, for example, Jose Gonzalez, who taught high school, he was sent to teach middle school reading, and he's not a reading teacher. And so, there was that effort to either if we couldn't fire them, then they were displaced and they were set up in situations where, there could be failure. And then some other teachers, they remained, and they've been a lot of us have been working with the new department and the new creation, the culturally relevant pedagogy and instruction department. And so, we've tried to get back in the sense that, we have the experience in creating a program that works. And so, we're kind of at the table again, so to speak. But yeah, some of us, our livelihood was attacked. We were discredited. Our character was attacked, and so it was a tough couple of years initially after the program was terminated.
Wow, that's really difficult. Are you aware of similar attacks on ethnic studies courses, books, or teachers in other parts of Arizona or in other states?
Yeah, in Arizona, that to my knowledge, because we were one of the few, if not the only, ethnic studies department at the K-12 level, we are the ones that were attacked in that context. I know that soon after our elimination, other programs were attacked at the university level. But then, miraculously, there have been other states that have looked at bringing on these types of programs. For example, in California, LA Unified School District, they just passed an ethnic studies, requirement. I know that in El Paso, Texas, they were also looking at, making these courses a part of the high school programs. So, while, some have been attacked, I think at the K-12 level, we were probably the only group, but yet other groups other schools have been able to demand these types of programs with success.
Okay, good. I thought I had heard something about an attack in Texas, but I can't remember the details. We'll just let that go for now. I want to ask you what the lessons are for the supporters of ethnic studies and social justice education anywhere. Right. What are the lessons we should take away?
Well, it's like I tell critical educators nationally, because now I do some consulting work, but if you're going to teach from a different perspective, if you're going to teach ethnic studies, women's studies, then you need to be ready to be scrutinized, because in that you're challenging the traditional view of history or the traditional curriculum, quote unquote. And so you have to be ready to get scrutinized, and you have to have the courage to stand up to that scrutiny and to fight it. I mean, in our case, we were discriminated against. As a group, it was clear discrimination against a group, and so those are some of the lessons that we have to be ready to withstand that scrutiny and to have the courage to fight it, because we know that having multiple perspectives is going to provide us, our students, our society, with a cross-cultural perspective on history and on, in general. And so, that makes for, I believe, more compassionate, empathetic society. And so, it's a program and programs that are much needed in our society, in our schools, and so, but they're going to be scrutinized, and so we need to be ready for that attack.
Right. And anything you would say to those who are supporters of ethnic studies and social justice education about what they should be doing now, whether they're educators or community members or students?
Yeah, I would say that in your respective communities and, in your respective states, that we should be pushing to ensure that our students have equitable opportunities, that our students are given equal resources and non-biased materials in the classroom, and that we are providing them with a relevancy to the content in the curriculum that they're going to connect to. And so, that's what we need to be pushing for in our schools, because, again, we'd be in a position where we can produce students, human beings that are going to be engaged civically, that are going to be compassionate, that are going to be culturally competent. And so those are the programs that we should be pushing for, and not looking at focusing on standardized tests and where the system is focused now. So we need to fight for those programs that are really, truly liberatory, that are truly social justice charged and centered, and that are really going to impact and transform our communities and ultimately society.
All right, very well said. What makes you most concerned about the future of public education, and what makes you most hopeful?
What really concerns me is the continued dehumanizing practices in the classroom that are imposed by the state, by the districts, that is focusing on standardized tests and creating these tests that students cannot connect to. And so, that's concerning, the level of dehumanization in the classroom that, forces teachers to have oppositional and negative relationships with their students, because everything is focused on data and the outcomes of high-stakes testing. And so that really, it hurts me to the core as a critical educator, and it's not what I look forward to in the classroom, yet it's a reality. But what gives me the hope is that I know that, there are educators across the nationwide, that really believe in these practices and that are fighting towards a liberatory education that is going to provide, those opportunities across the board, which is what, we believe our educational system is for. We believe that it's a level playing field, that everyone's going to get, an opportunity, equal opportunity, but it's not. Education is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, and that is weeds certain groups out and allows only a dominant group to have success.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Anything else you want to address that we haven't covered today?
No, I think that about covers it. Yeah,
Okay.
just, thank you for continuing to highlight this and for bringing the awareness that, this is what's critical and this is what's going to be transformative to our society.
Absolutely. Well, our guest today has been Norma Gonzalez. She has been a curriculum specialist with the Mexican American Studies Department for 10 years and currently is a third grade teacher at Monzo Elementary School in Tucson. Norma, I just want to thank you so much for sharing your insight, your wisdom, and your inspiration with us today.
It was my pleasure, and I'm honored. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot.